Good evening, everyone. I just realized that I forgot to plug in my microphone, so we're going to have to go with what we've got in the, unless you're not hearing me. Can you hear me okay? Let me just make sure you can hear me. I think I've got it in the laptop microphone rather than my regular. You can hear me just fine. Okay, good. All right. Lots going on. Whole lot going on. Lots to cover. So why don't we go ahead and just get started with our prayer and jump right in. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay. So, as I said, lots going on right now. And I want to give you a couple of quick updates before we get right into it. First and foremost, we have finally finished our 106-page report on Catholic Relief Services. It's got over 100 footnotes. Those are individual, independent sources. It is, what's not coming through? Is you not hearing me? Am I choppy? What's the deal? All good? Okay. All right. I'm always wary because something invariably is going to go wrong. I can tell. All right. I'm going to go ahead. So the big report on Catholic Relief Services, we're going to roll it out over a series of 6 portions. It's so huge, and the subject matter is so complex that it's important for us to make sure that every little portion of it is easily digestible, because there's so much. By the time you get to one portion, you've already forgotten the first one, and by the time you get to the second or the third portion, you've forgotten the first 2. So we're going to roll it out beginning in March. The first week in March, we're going to issue the first portion of the report. The first portion is going to center on Catholic Relief Services documents from just, oops, I'm frozen. Okay, it may be their connection. If everybody else hears me okay, it may be just John and Gloria. So John and Gloria, try refreshing your browser. Okay. So where was I? Oh, yes. What we need to, or what we're going to do is we're going to roll this out. The first portion is going to center on Catholic Relief Services documents that are promoting condom use, and we have a number of them, and it's undeniable. I mean, CRS can't possibly deny the fact that their own documentation, which we found on their own website, with their own copyright date, their own statement that all the materials contained are the responsibility of either CRS or the program that they're responsible for. All of this says that those documents for the prevention of pregnancy. So it's not just condom use, it's condom use as contraceptive, which is intrinsically evil. This is a CRS thing. And this is also, and this is something that we need to keep in mind. This is not the first time they've been caught with this. So if they come back and say, oh gosh, we do so much and do so many different things that these projects, sometimes things just slip through. Here's the problem, because all of those documents that CRS produced that are promoting condoms were done under a very specific project. And the project, we found, is responsible specifically for promoting contraception. Furthermore, as we were going through CRS's implementation of these projects, what we discovered is that CRS was responsible for creating these various health referral networks. And I've talked about this in the past. But in these health referral networks, some of their partners even in these health referral networks is to bring young girls in and indoctrinate them in contraception as a part of this network. So that's another problem. A third thing that we're going to be talking about are two very specific projects. One is called KIDS, KIDSS, and the other one is called SMILE. We go through and we show how CRS is a government-funded program that CRS is implementing in several countries, and we don't know specifically how many because it's a little fuzzy. But we do know concretely of at least three. And this program, which is called DREAMS, DREAMS, that CRS is implementing, part of the program stipulation, its primary purpose is to indoctrinate young girls in the use of contraception and condoms. It's stated right there in the purpose of the project itself. Now, enrolled in that, they say, well, not everybody, all the implementing partners they mean, not everybody has to implement all of the different elements of the project, which gives CRS their out, right? CRS can then say, oh no, we didn't have to implement the contraception promoting part, just this other part. Not good enough. Because when CRS is introducing a program, what it says in the program itself is that all of the players have to work together for the full implementation of all of the various intended what they call interventions. And interventions are basically different individual parts of the project geared towards the ultimate goal. And that includes the spread of contraception and condoms. So everybody has to play a part in including or being inclusive in promoting the greater aspect of the whole project, which is the spread of contraception. So in essence, what CRS is saying is, well, we don't do anything to facilitate abortion. We just build their clinics. We just install toilets in their in Planned Parenthood's abortion facilities. That's all we do. Well, I'm sorry, but that's part and parcel to the evil of the organization itself. You can't do that. So anyway, we'll be rolling these out over a course of about 6 weeks, one part at a time. I intend to produce a series of videos that we will release with each portion of the report. I've already put the draft in the hands of several reporters, and I've already gotten a couple of interviews lined up. So when this thing rolls out, it's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard, and it's going to hit fast, and it's going to hit furious. One of the things that we are really going to focus on, is a petition. LifeSite News, I'm going to work with LifeSite News on putting together a petition. This particular petition, the whole purpose of it is to get as many people as possible to sign on and to tell the U.S. bishops that we demand, we're not requesting, we are demanding. We demand a full third-party, independent investigation of CRS's projects. And we also demand that Catholic Relief Services completely divorce itself from federal funding, because it's the federal funding that always gets it into trouble. Every time I've looked at CRS, if they have their own project that they're implementing somewhere, no problems. I mean, it might be, kind of crunchy granola, go out there and do nice things and good things for people without really talking about the gospel. And if you do talk about the gospel, it's always, hippie, crunchy granola Jesus. But those projects, we don't, even if we find them liturgically bad or even theologically off, they're not morally wrong. But it's when CRS gets into bed with the federal government that we realize that they get into all kinds of trouble. They take federal funding, or if they take funding from like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or if they take funding from the Global Fund, some of these non-government funding agencies, they're still just as bad. So we want CRS to be completely divorced from that kind of funding. If it wants to be Catholic, then it's got to take money from Catholics and use it for Catholic purposes. Otherwise, it's just an NGO, and it ought to strip its name Catholic from the name. So that's the update on our report. Like I said, we're going to get started rolling that out the first week in March. And I can't wait. I was so fried. The best I could do was to sit down and watch old episodes of the Rockford Files. Anyway, so that's our update. Now, somebody wrote in prior to our program this evening, asking if I would comment on the coronavirus. And here's what they wrote. Hi, Michael. Thanks. I'm looking forward to it, meaning looking forward to the Inner Circle this Friday. Besides what is on the program, which is much appreciated, could you please include the outbreak of the sinister coronavirus? Friends of mine who know much are of the mindset that truly what is going on here is bio-warfare. Please read this, and can it be discussed? It is not part of the entire communist effort to eventually, or is it not part of the entire communist effort to eventually take over humanity? I would say so. It falls completely in line with the warnings of our Blessed Mother. What good would be good if you could get a medical member with you to discuss this and give advice. Now, I don't have very rudimentary when it comes to use of these tools. I don't know how to do all that stuff. I've not taken the time to learn it yet. So I don't have the ability to Skype in an expert and talk about it. But what I can do, she did send an article, and the headline of the article, I'll just give you the article and I'll let you read it on your own and you can make your own conclusions. But the headline is Coronavirus Update. Massive cover-up exposed by bioweapons expert. And some of the big bolded portions say, deadly virus created in a Wuhan laboratory, says U.S. international law professor, a laboratory specially designed by the World Health Organization. There are a lot of different interesting connections. One portion says new coronavirus has links to manufactured SARS virus and the HIV virus. I can't speak to whether it is, here, hold on. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. I can't speak to whether it is actually a bioweapon, but it does seem to have a lot of the marks of being a bio in boiled water. So I think that there is some veracity to the idea that this is indeed a bioweapons disaster. Why it happened is anybody's guess. It's interesting that the virus broke out right around the time that China was experiencing some unrest, and a lot of people were starting to kind of rise up. And now, because of the virus, you have, yes, I had heard that too, that China brought the virus from a Canadian lab. That's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. It's entirely plausible even. I can't confirm it. So I can't give you a definitive yes or no. but I do think that it is plausible. But I do find it interesting that during a time when China was experiencing basically a bit of unrest, okay, you had some citizens who were starting to stand up, and especially what was going on in Hong Kong, and all of a sudden you have this outbreak. So what happens? China starts setting up quarantine camps, and they forcibly drag people out of their houses and homes and into these quarantine camps. So what happens? The government has to clamp down because of a disaster. The government is now the savior of the people, in spite of the people rising up against the oppression of the government. You see how that works? In other words, the government may have created its own disaster so that it can be its own savior. Somebody else's guess is probably as good as the experts. There's another possibility. Our Lord takes our hubris, allows us to take it to a certain degree, and because of our pride, allows us to fall flat on our faces. That could very well be too. Whatever the case, there are two very distinct outcomes. One is global plague. I don't think that's where we're headed. I think that maybe a lot of people are going to get sick, and probably a lot of people in China are going to get sick and die. I think that around the rest of the world, maybe in the United States, we'll have some pocket outbreaks. Those will be quickly quarantined. Some people will probably die from it. But I think in the United States, we're talking in the hundreds, not in the thousands, and certainly not in the tens of thousands that are being reported in China. So that's one part. The other part is economic. Because what we have to realize is that here in the United States, China is the primary manufacturer of goods that are purchased by Americans. So what happens if in China there is a halt in production? If there's a halt in production, that means there is a shortage of goods. If there's a shortage of goods, that means the prices are going to go up. If the prices go up, that means that people need to either shore up their abilities, their luxuries, so that they can purchase, necessities as opposed to luxuries, or we wind up having a series of layoffs and a recession. Because a shortage of goods leading to an increase in prices puts everybody in poverty. It's the great equalizer. It's a big risk for us to have all of our manufacture over in China. Huge risk. Now, I think that Donald Trump, foreseeing a lot of that, hey, having all of our manufacture over in China is not good for America, and actually encouraging American production, we're going to see a lot more American production coming out of this. And furthermore, what we will probably see is that those companies that are primarily reliant on Chinese goods, the American economy will start to thrive after that, if it is allowed to. And that's a big if. And a lot of that hinges on who wins in the next election. So I'm not going to give a plug or a promotion here, just kind of a foreshadowing of what we may face if. Okay, hold on. The stream is interrupting way too often. I'm cutting out. All right. Let me see. Good stream there. Okay. So if everybody give me a quick assessment, if things are interrupting, just say interrupting. If it's been steady for the whole 20 minutes that we've been on, then just say steady. So go. If it's been interrupting, say interrupting. If it's been steady, say steady. I want to get an assessment because then that'll tell me whether it's my end or your end. So I will wait because I want to see. And I'm going to test interrupting. Okay. Then it's my end. It's my end. And I tested the internet just before I came on. So this is ridiculous. I don't understand. Okay. Okay now. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I don't understand technology. All of this is kind of magic to me, if you ask me. I don't know why it keeps interrupting because my internet says it's great. Okay. All right. So now that things seem to be going okay, I'll go ahead and pick up where I left off. Why don't we go ahead and shift topics real quick? So I've been talking about the virus and talking about what to look forward to and what could possibly happen. I do think that the coronavirus is going to lead to a okay, if it buffers a couple minutes, then listen. Okay, if you get a long buffer, just try resetting your or refreshing your browser, and that should fix it. That should fix it. Anyway, I think the coronavirus is going to lead to an economic correction, and that's the bottom line. I think that we're going to see a shortage of goods coming out of China, and because of that, a lot of companies in the United States that rely on Chinese goods are going to have a problem. And then afterward, because Donald Trump had the foresight to move us away from reliance on China and more towards American industry, a lot of companies that started already shifting over to American manufactured goods are going to see a boom at the end of this. So that's my prediction. It's not gospel, it's just my guess. But anyway, there it is. So let's jump into what happened earlier this week with the apostolic exhortation. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation on the Amazonian Synod, and then his introduction of the final document on the Synod. And the reason that I titled it that is because the way, the way things work within the last 40 years of the church is that a lot of times what happens is a conference or a commission or a Vatican body of some kind assumes for itself an authority that it does not have. And we see this very frequently with, say, bishops' conferences. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has exactly this much authority. Has no authority, has no binding power. The documents that are put out by the USCCB make them do. But the USCCB itself holds no authority. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences and various other pontifical academies hold that much authority. And yet they hold studies and commissions, and they put out papers and all sorts of different documents that seem authoritative. You have the National Catholic, what is it called? The NCBC, the Catholic Bioethics Center, has no authority. A lot of people defer to it and its decisions on things like brain death, contraception, abortion. But a situation that is echoing what took place in the Second Vatican Council. So in the Second Vatican Council, you had a bunch of documents that were signed by the Council Fathers. These documents themselves could be read in two different ways. This is why we have the spirit of the Second Vatican Council. They can be read in an orthodox manner, a way that is faithful to the 2,000-year traditions and teachings of the Catholic Church, or they can be read in a heterodox manner that twists church teaching and allows certain innovations to enter in. And in those different aspects of the council, there were times where the council would say there needs to be further study on something. Council, you would have a commission, or you would have some other group get together and say, we have researched this topic and we've come to the conclusion of X. Or we, the liturgical commission, have produced a new mass, as if it were replacing the old mass. Or you even have commissions that go into whether there can be women deacons, female ordination of deacons. Or you have commissions that look into questions regarding any number of things. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But those are different ideas that have been discussed, and papers have been put out, and certain changes have been made. But the changes don't change doctrine. They don't change the fundamental teachings of the church. But sometimes they give the appearance that they do. And the latest example, there are two recent examples. The most recent example is Pope Francis with the document that he wrote, or no, the new catechism that he updated, that says that the death penalty is inadmissible. It's a very odd phrase. It's a very strange word, inadmissible. To say that something is inadmissible is to say that you can't account for it. You can't allow it in. You can't invite it in. But to say that something is unallowable, so inadmissible is not the right word. It's not the right word. Inadmissible has no meaning in a theological or a canonical context, at least in relation to the way it's used. The right word would have been to say that capital punishment is unallowable. It's not allowed. Permissible. Think about that word for just a second, because it almost holds a double entendre. To say that it is inadmissible in the full context would be to say that, I'm going to give it a pause. Why don't we go ahead and say a quick prayer to St. Michael. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protector against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay. Hopefully I'm not cutting out. Let me just check the internet, make sure. Make sure it's not me. Nope. Still have a very strong internet signal here. My speed test is saying 20 to 30 megabytes per second, so it really should be fine. All right. So as I was saying, the word inadmissible is the wrong word. But if you think about it for a second, what happens if you say that the death penalty is inadmissible? If you're talking about it in context of whether it can be entered into church law that it's not morally acceptable, well, then in that case, it is inadmissible to a certain extent. Inadmissible also means that you can't admit to it. The wording makes no sense. So you have this weaponized ambiguity. It's ambiguous what is meant. The word itself holds no real meaning in a theological or moral context. So what happens? People run with it. They take the word and they say, hey, he said it's inadmissible, which means you're not allowed to do it. That's not it. It was written in it's in the New Catechism, so it's you know what? I really should get with John Henry and ask him about how to do it. I think that he's probably see part of the problem is I don't have a hardwired in internet line, so that could be part of it. Anyway, so weaponized ambiguity in the apostolic exhortation, paragraph 2. Pope Francis says this: during the synod, I listened to the presentations and read with interest the reports of the discussion groups. In this exhortation, I wish to offer my own response to this process of dialogue and discernment. So already he's saying he's just offering his own response, his own thoughts. He then says, I will not go into place that text or to duplicate it. So he is establishing that the exhortation is secondary to the final document. And then he says, I wish merely to propose. Propose is not impose. If he's proposing something, he's just simply saying, here are a few thoughts. Here are some ideas. He is not imposing anything. He's not defining anything. There is nothing magisterial about what he's about to say. So, proposing ideas. He says, I wish merely to propose a brief framework. So he's not even proposing concrete ideas, just an outline. Framework for reflection that can apply concretely to the life of the Amazon region, a synthesis of some of the larger concerns that I have expressed in earlier documents, and that can help guide us to a harmonious, creative, and fruitful reception of the entire synodal process. So he's simply saying that this document is simply a way of facilitating and guiding the synodal process. It's a synod, so I'm going to let the synod stand and the conclusions of the synod, which profited from the participation of many people who know better than myself or the Roman Curia. Here's what's interesting about this. In September of 2018, Pope Francis issued the motu proprio Episcopalis Communio. And this particular motu proprio established new norms or new rules regarding synods. And he says, and this is one of the articles in the motu proprio, it says, having received the approval of the members of the final document of the assembly or of the members, the final document of the assembly is offered to the Roman pontiff, who decides to publish it. If expressly approved by the Roman pontiff, the final document participates in the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter. If the Roman pontiff granted the deliberative power of the assembly of the synod in accordance with Canon 343 of the Code of Canon Law, the final document participates in the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter once ratified and promulgated by him. So this is a lot of very specific language. We have the words ratified, we have the words promulgated, we have the words expressly approved. Now, nowhere in the exhortation, but let me get to my note here. Where did I put it? In the Code of Canon Law, where is it? In the Code of Canon Law, Canon 343, this is what it says, or issue decrees about them, unless, in certain cases, the Roman pontiff has endowed it with deliberative powers in which he ratifies the decisions of the synod. So these are very, very specific words. It's hard to tell whether the document was ratified or promulgated or officially approved. Why? Because what Pope Francis says is that, where is it? He says, at the same time, I would like to officially present the final document. Now, present is not ratify. Present is not approve necessarily. Present is not promulgate. So we have what is the appearance of authority for something that he's not necessarily giving final approval to or final authority to. It looks like it, but it isn't necessarily. And so a lot of people are now deliberating over whether this thing's magisterial or not. In fact, in the Vatican, the panel at the press conference sat there and they even disagreed among themselves whether this thing had magisterial weight or not. Some of the bishops or some of the cardinals there said yes, and some of the cardinals there said no. And so we are left with a dubia once again. Once again. In relation to the sanction for the ordination of married men, and he didn't officially give any sanction for female deacons. However, let me find the portion here. That's not the right document. Oh, no, it is the right document. Is this? Yeah, this is the right document. Okay. So in the final document, remember, he's deferring to the final document here. He provided a framework and a system of ideas, but nothing concrete, right? So in section 104, letter D, the permanent diaconate, listen to what he says. The importance of this ministry for the community, and particularly because of the needs of the church for church service in many communities, especially indigenous ones. The specific pastoral needs of the Amazon Christian communities, I'm cutting out again. Lord, please. I'll wait a second. Let it tell me when it's good again. Because when I cut out, I don't want you to miss this. This is important stuff. So tell me when it's not cutting out so much. Let it buffer. Am I good yet? Was okay, now not. Okay, yeah, my internet did slow down. Okay. Hopefully, God willing, it'll improve. In and out, white circles, and then I cut out. Uh, nope, it's definitely my upload speed right now. My upload speed. Upload speed just dropped. I sure wish I knew how to change directions for this. Okay, now it should be. I should be good now. It just jumped back up. Okay. Signals. So it's all yeah. It's not you guys. It's my internet. It's my internet. Totally reliant. Well, let me ask you this. Would it be better, do you think? Did I try banging on the keyboard really hard? Yeah, I wish. Okay, let me ask you this. I'm going to type it in a second. Yeah, I was just going to say, would it be better for me to just pre-record and release at a certain time? Would that be preferable to you guys? Would it be to pre? Okay. No? Okay, so that's one vote no. You'd actually prefer the live in okay. Okay. No, you like it live. The better live. Okay. Yes, and post to YouTube, but not broadcast. Live is better. I wonder if there's a way for me. You know what? I'll bet there's a way for me to record what I'm doing. I'll bet I can record it while I'm interacting. And then if the broadcast doesn't work out quite so well, I can always send out another link for a clear recorded in-house version of what we talked about. That might be the way to go. So what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and buy a camcorder, a video recorder, and I'll set up the video recorder to record at the same time that I'm talking to you guys. And if there's an interruption in the stream or something like that, things don't work out well, something is lost, I still have a backup and I can re-upload the backup later. And the interaction's still there. We still have interactions. I can still chat with you live. But at the same time, you can have a fully recorded session. I think that's the solution. And that's what I'll do. So sometimes when we have an evening like we do tonight and things get kind of wonky and it cuts in and out, it would probably be better if I just went ahead and did that recording along with the live session and do it that way. So that's what we'll do. I'm glad we talked. See, this is the importance of doing it live, because then we can talk and we can have this interaction and I can come up with a solution. So I think that would probably be better. So I'll do that. So we'll continue to do it live, and I will record it at the same time, and I'll upload the second aspect if the first one doesn't turn out so well. So good. And it seems, yes, well, the CRS themed broadcasts are going to be very, very important. Yeah, those are going to be very important. All right. I'm going to go ahead and try and get through the rest of this as quickly. I want to read to you what it says about the permanent diaconate. And he goes on, the Synod Fathers, the beginning of the church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it says, let's see, where is the... Today's diaconate should also promote integral ecology, human development, the diaconate to push social justice. I'm going to read again what it says. Today's diaconate should also promote integral ecology, human development, pastoral social work, the service of those in situations of vulnerability and poverty, modeled on Christ the servant and becoming a merciful seminarian, solidary and diaconal church. Paragraph 105. Priests are to keep in mind that the deacon is at the service of the community by appointment and under the authority of the bishop, and that they have an obligation to support permanent deacons and an act in communion with them. The maintenance of the permanent deacons must be kept in view. This includes the vocational process according to the criteria of admission. The candidate's motives or motivations should relate to the service of the mission of the permanent diaconate in the church and the world today. The formation program must combine academic adapted to each local reality. It is desirable that the wife and children participate in the formation process. And then 106, the program of studies or curriculum for the formation of permanent deacons, in addition to mandatory subjects, should include topics that foster ecumenical, interreligious, and intercultural dialogue, the history of the church in the Amazon, affectivity and sexuality, indigenous worldviews, integral ecology, and other cross-cutting themes that are relevant to the diaconal ministry. Again, the diaconate is not about preaching the gospel. It's not about trying to save souls or facilitate certain Bible study programs. No, it's social justice. Here's the key part, though. We want to encourage, support, and personally accompany the vocational process and formation of future permanent deacons in the Riverside and indigenous communities with the participation of pastors and religious men and women. With the participation of pastors and religious men and women. So when we look at that, one of the other thing I want to show you, is that there is a portion is it? I got to find it real quick. Here it is. So section C, the time for women's presence, paragraph 103, and this is the one that I was missing. In many consultations carried out in the Amazon, the fundamental role of religious and lay women in the Church of the Amazon and its communities was recognized and emphasized, given the wealth of services they provide. The Study Commission on the Diaconate of Women, which posted in 2016, has already arrived as a commission at partial findings regarding the reality of the diaconate of women in the early centuries of the church and its implications for today. We would therefore like to share our experiences and reflections with the commission, and we await its results. Here's the thing. The commission concluded by now, but hasn't for whatever reason, submitted its initial findings to Pope Francis, indicating that there's no role for ordination of women to the diaconate. But they continue to act as if the door is still open. And so they want to continue to push that button and push that envelope. And they're going to go forward and forward and forward in the hopes that we can actually wind up with women deacons somehow. Okay? Smoke and mirrors. He did not close the door. A lot of people have been saying he closed the door on it. He did not. But there's something else about this whole document, and maybe I'm going to have to save this for next week, just because we're running out of time and we've had a lot of cutting in and out, and so it's a little frustrating. But the other aspect to this, which I think is far more insidious, and it definitely deserves a lot more attention, are all the sections that Pope Francis has on the liturgical practices. I want to read you something. Nobody's talked about this. He has a whole section on enculturation. Paragraph 73 of Pope Francis's Apostolic, false. Mysticism. Indigenous mysticism means shamans. That's what it means. We should esteem the indigenous mysticism that sees the interconnection and interdependence of the whole creation, the mysticism, all its forms of life. Let me tell you something. That's all BS. That whole section is BS. The mysticism is based on fear of natural processes in one sense and fear of demons in another. It's a fear-based mysticism. And so what they do is they take drugs like ayahuasca to go on some sort of spirit journey. That's their mysticism. This is garbage. To say that we should esteem their mysticism? No, that's absolute bunk. He goes on. Enculturate elevates and fulfills certain... oh, wait, I just read that part. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. He goes on. At the same time, though, we are called to turn this relationship with God present in the cosmos into an increasing personal relationship with a thou, who sustains our lives and wants to give them a meaning, a thou who knows and loves us. So rather than talking about Christ, who saves us, rather than talking about the Blessed Virgin Mary, who loves us, he talks about a thou. He might as well have just said a God. That we want a personal relationship with someone. And then it gets really insidious because he puts in a portion of a poem. The poem is this: shadows float from me, dead wood, but the star is born without reproach over the expert hands of his child that conquer the waters and the night. It has to be enough for me to know that you know me completely from before my days. It's a bunch of empty words. The poem really doesn't mean anything. But what is really bad about it is that he footnotes the poem. And the poem, let me pull up, was written by Pedro Casaladiaga. Pedro Casaladiaga. Here's the Wikipedia page on Pedro Casaladiaga. In Brazil from 1970 to 2005. A bishop since 1971, he is one of the best known exponents of liberation theology. He is one of the best known exponents of liberation theology. He has received numerous awards, including the International Catalonia Prize in 2006. He has been a forceful advocate in support of indigenous peoples and has published several volumes of poetry. So, he's a huge advocate of liberation theology. Listen, pay attention to this. Paragraph 73, Pope Francis says all that stuff about enculturation, ends with a footnoted poem by this guy, this liberation theology guy. The very next paragraph, paragraph 74, Pope Francis says this: similarly, a relationship with Jesus Christ, true God and true man, liberator and redeemer. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that he just footnoted and cited a major proponent of liberation theology and then identified Christ as liberator. He's not talking about a liberator from sins, but from social injustice and social oppression. Liberator and redeemer is not inimical to the markedly cosmic worldview that characterizes the indigenous peoples, since he is also the risen Lord who transformation. And that's footnoted 106. Footnoted 106. That, of course, was cited in Laudato Si. And if I read it right, he was citing paragraph 235. In paragraph 235, if I'm not mistaken, was the same one that referenced Teilhard de Chardin. That was paragraph 53, or footnote 53. The point is that all of this is cosmic Christ stuff. This is all of this, the world is all one, the universe is one, we're all interconnected. It's kind of like Star Wars: The Force. Okay? It's this cosmic Christ. I'm off? What do you mean I'm completely off? You mean I got cut off? Am I still live? Do you guys still see me? Patricia, what do you mean I'm completely off? Do you mean I got cut off? No, I'm okay. So he goes on and he talks about, he continues. He is present in a glorious and mysterious way in the river, the trees, the fish, the wind, the Lord who reigns in creation, without ever losing his transfigured wounds while in the Eucharist. So he's conflating a lot of these different worldviews. He's bringing together these ideas of pantheism and of I don't even know what to call it. This cosmic Christism. It's Teilhard de Chardin. And he's wrapping it into some sort of weird mold and then tying in indigenous mysticism. And that mysticism, incidentally, he actually addresses. This is a really bad portion. I wish I had a lot more that I wanted to go into, and then things kind of disrupted. Where is it? Oh, yeah, get this. Paragraphs 78 and 79. I'm gonna leave you with this portion, because this I think kind of wraps up the real problem and the real direction that we're going to see the synod really and truly taking us. All that stuff about women deacons and married priests, I think I have a feeling that that was smoke and mirrors to take our attention away from what he was really doing, which is monkeying with the liturgy. He's talking about enculturation. Paragraph 78, the process of enculturation involving not only the indigenous, but also individuals, but also peoples, demands a respectful and understanding love of those peoples. The process has already begun in much of the Amazon region. More than 40 years ago, the bishops of the Peruvian Amazon pointed out that in many of the groups present in the region, those to be evangelized, shaped by a varied and changing culture, have been initially evangelized. As a result, they possess certain features of popular Catholicism that perhaps originally introduced by pastoral workers are now something that people have made their own, even changing their meaning and handing them down from generation to generation. Then Pope Francis says this whopper: let us not be quick to describe as superstition or paganism certain religious practices that arise spontaneously from the life of peoples. Rather, we ought to know how to distinguish the wheat growing alongside the tares. And then he says, paragraph 79, it is possible to take up an indigenous symbol in some way without necessarily considering it as idolatry. He is talking specifically about the Pachamama. Specifically about the Pachamama. And that's where I want to leave off for right now, because I want to develop this thought, and I think we'll pick this up next week. I'm going to talk about the liturgical dangers that are going to be coming out of this synod, because I think that that's ultimately what this whole thing was all about to begin with. I think it was all about changing how we're going to do the liturgy, how we're going to enculturate the church, so that we'll have regional churches where your own cultures can do whatever they want, because your culture is more important than having a universal. So yeah, I'm going to close there, because the spottiness of the internet, there's so much that I want to develop and I want to talk to you about, that I don't want to lose you. So I'm going to run a few tests this week. So yeah, next week we'll pick this right up. We'll continue on, and so we'll go ahead and call it a night for tonight. I hope that you all have a good weekend, that the frustrations of the internet didn't cause you too much consternation, and I will be getting a video recorder so that I can have a follow-up upload that will cover the whole thing, even if the stream gets interrupted. So that'll be our fallback. So good night, sleep well, and let's say our Benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Sancta Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right. Good night, everybody. God bless you, and I will see you next week. Oh, and by the way, next week, yes, next week is fine. Don't worry about it. I'll see you next week. God bless.